Web Marketing That Works podcast, episode 134, with today's guest, Nate Smith.
Welcome to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Come behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments and listen in as amazing guests confess the truth about what really works. Now, here are your hosts, Adam Franklin and Toby Jenkins.
My name's Adam Franklin, and you are listening to the Web Marketing That Works podcast. Welcome back. This is the show for people who love marketing on the web. You'll be taken behind the scenes of real-life marketing experiments. We'll look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. We'll confess what's failed and reveal the truth about what really works. This show is brought to you by the book that I wrote with Toby Jenkins. It's called Web Marketing That Works. There's a gift for you for listening, and that is the bundle of 33 free marketing templates. If you'd like to get your hands on those, please head over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now, today's guest is Nate Miles. He is the founder of the 80/20 Drummer, a business that he has built into a 4-figure monthly income, and he teaches entrepreneurs how to do the same. In today's show, we talk about the process of actually validating products, because I know I've certainly been guilty of building products and then trying to sell them. And when they don't work, that can be incredibly expensive and time-consuming. So we cover that, and we also look at the value of funnel design, aka writing good emails in a sequence that basically are set to automatic once somebody joins your ecosystem. So we're going to look at all of those things in today's episode with Nate. So let's head over to the show. My name's Adam Franklin, and on the line we have Nate Smith. How are you?
Hey, Adam. I'm great. Thanks so much for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. I'm really interested to talk to you today about some of the stuff about your online course and validating courses. So we've got plenty of time to jump into that. But let's quickly kick off with the 8020drummer.com and your experience, I guess, creating that and getting customers with that.
Yeah, so my backstory real quick is I've been a professional musician for about 15 years. I've been living in New York City almost as long. And starting about 6 or 7 years ago, I was getting frustrated with the professional music world in New York. It seemed like there were a lot of people competing for a really small pie, and I didn't like a lot of the kind of attitudes that went along with it. I didn't see anybody really succeeding or living the life they wanted. And at the time, I was also in a day job that was really frustrating for me. So around that time, I started to get exposed to the possibility of entrepreneurship. So I didn't, believe it or not, approach things in terms of, I want to incorporate some of these entrepreneurship skills to make more money from music. It was actually way more oblique than that. I'm like, let me try to start a business, and what skill can I use as a basis? And I actually went through a bunch of different things. I tried a travel blog. At one point, I tried to manufacture a crazy hybrid sneaker. So I emailed a bunch of people in China from Alibaba. And about 3 months in, I was like, hang on, maybe I should try to do something with this drum thing. So that was the genesis of that. And, 2020 hindsight, obviously, that was the skill I should have been doubling down on. But it's funny to think that it took me so long to arrive at it.
It's funny how doing stuff online, it can be right under your nose, but you can't see it. And you go down all these dead-end paths and you come full circle back to you go, oh man, why didn't I just do that from the start? I've certainly can relate to that quite a bit. So a few things that didn't work. What were the lessons from that, do you reckon?
Okay, so I launched the business per se about 3 years ago, but it still took me 3 years or 2 years and change to really launch a successful product. So what didn't work was trying to launch a product without input from an audience and making a guess about what I thought people wanted. And what also didn't work was trying to run paid traffic just to get traffic to my website when I really hadn't dialed down and figured out exactly who my customers were and what they wanted. So I had 2 generations of products, the first of which was an utter abysmal failure. And the second of which did better because it was more informed by my audience. And the whole time I've been doing one big dumb thing right, which was making content for YouTube. So gradually people started to find me and they started to trust me. And I started to grow a list of people who had had experience with my teaching. So by the time the end of year 2 rolled around and I was ready to make a go at a 3rd generation product, I was better situated to do that. I had the audience who was engaged enough to tell me what they wanted, and I had enough wherewithal to ask them.
And so just quickly, how are you growing your list from a YouTube channel?
So it's basically been just pumping out content. And for the first year, that was literally all it was. It was kind of a combination of about 85% things that I was just interested in and kind of letting people come to me. And then I had one video that was kind of a runaway success. And I actually emailed Derek Sivers about this because I heard him on Altiture's podcast and there was like some synergistic stuff about it. I was so excited about it. But I made a video about another popular video, and I wasn't thinking in terms of any sort of like brilliant SEO strategy or anything like that. But my video started just taking off. It got like 30,000 views, 40,000 views. And I realized it was because in the search algorithm, YouTube was putting it up next to this really popular video. And since it was synergistic, people were clicking over to it. So then a light bulb went off. So I started making more videos like that, but still about things I was interested in. And then most recently, what's worked for me is doing these sort of joint venture type of things. So when I got a platform of about 10,000 subscribers, I was better situated to reach out to other people with similar platforms or bigger platforms and offer to collaborate. So in most cases, people would offer to bring me on their channel as well. And so I got that extra exposure. But even worst case scenario, people would come on my channel, they'd still share the video with their audience. So it got a bunch of new viewers.
Okay, so just in terms of the actual mechanism, are you embedding those YouTube videos on your website and then having an exit pop or a call to action to join your email list, or is that directly happening like on YouTube? Like, what's the actual tool, or how are you getting people onto your list?
Got it. Okay, so in terms of a traffic strategy, I'm viewing my website as the hub and YouTube as a traffic channel or a spoke. So one thing I got super dialed in like the last year is having one single best performing lead magnet from the perspective of conversions. So in other words, it was just the lowest customer acquisition effort and the most potent conversion from lead magnet to purchase. And so I've been funneling everybody from the YouTube videos to that. And what I do is at the end of every video, I have a CTA, and I basically just say, if you've dug this video, if you like the feeling of getting better at the drums that you've had from absorbing the content in this video, I want to offer you a 3-video crash course that'll take you from mediocre to feeling better about your playing in just 3 weeks. I have an annotation on the screen. I'm reciting it now. I can't help it. And then people can click on that annotation, takes them directly to the landing page. And I wish I had my new business anywhere near that well dialed in, but it was definitely from 4 years of trial and error that I got it to that point.
Okay. And what other things have you found important when it comes to online courses? Aside from the trial and error of getting it right over 3 or 4 times.
Right. So the biggest single lesson was definitely validate. And we were talking about this a little bit before the call. But now that I'm doing a little bit of consulting, I actually run into clients who may be super successful in other verticals, but they haven't launched courses yet. And I really caution them to not repeat the mistake that I made the first 2 times. So the validation I did was a 2-stage validation. And so the first was really just what problem can I solve for you? You know, sort of, I don't know if you're familiar with Ryan Levesque, but it's kind of like his deep dive survey, even though at the time I hadn't really heard of that. If I were to do it again, I'd certainly be more scientific about it. But just literally sending an email to people, my most engaged people, and saying, hey, you guys, you've been consuming my content for a year or 2 years. What can I help you with? What problems would you like help with? And I got a bunch of responses, and I got a few super potent responses, and one that I like to call like the golden nugget response that now when I help clients validate, that's sort of the low-hanging fruit I always look for. And this was from somebody who said, yeah, I'm not sure why you're trying to solve X problem for us. Why don't you just sell me Y? And he basically just handed me the product idea. And I was like, oh man. So then I was like, wow, okay. But there was another stage that I did, and I think this is no less important. And that was collect kind of the feature set that I thought people wanted, and then build like a hypothetical prototype of this product in my imagination, and then write a sales letter for it and send it out with essentially a buy link, not a live link to a buy now button, but a link asking people to commit to buy the product at the price point that I was offering it at. And I recommend that to everybody because it might give you a false positive. You know, just because someone says they will buy something, as we both know, doesn't mean that they actually will take out their wallet later on. In fact, my audience converted at about 35 to 40% of the people who said they would buy. But it will give you a true negative indication if you don't have a great product market fit with that course. So in other words, that would have given me a warning sign if I wasn't really dialed in and solving the right problem, and if I hadn't earned the trust before I spent any time, money, or effort to really build out the course.
Okay, so once you've got a bunch of people clicking the link to indicate a desire to buy, when do you actually make the decision to commit? Do you then actually send them an actual buy link and pre-sell it and then make it? Or do you then, is that enough to then go away and start building stuff? And how do you get feedback do you get feedback as you go? Like, yeah, talk to us about that.
So the way I would do it now and the way I recommend clients do it is different than the way I did it. At the time, I thought that was sufficient enough validation. So I did go away and start building it. And the one thing that I think I got right was that I almost video blogged. I made these iterative teaser videos about what was going into the course and sent them out to my list, once a week for 2 or 3 weeks. The other thing that I think is really good is you commit to a launch date. And I launched a minimum viable product. The course eventually was going to include 12 modules, but I launched with 4 modules and made the deadline. And what I would do if I were doing it today is exactly as you said. I would pre-sell it. So I would say to people, in exchange for pre-buying this product, you guys are going to get a chance to be the first cohort in. You're going to get a discount. You're going to get a chance to shape the eventual shape of the final product. And then, a lot of times I recommend people even throw in like a 15-minute coaching call. And I've seen that work super well. And yeah, again, by that point, like it's a no-brainer because you're already getting people to pay you money for a course when you haven't even created it yet. One other thing that I've seen work super well is a webinar as validation. So that's a way that you can ask people to pre-order when you haven't created anything yet. And there's really no explaining to do. You can just say, yeah, sign up for this webinar, pay me at this date at this time. I'm going to give a webinar or a masterclass, and that's going to be the first generation course.
Interesting. And how do you then, so assuming that sells enough and you do a good enough minimum viable product and flesh out the course, what sort of things are you then changing as you evolve into version 2 of a product like that?
Okay, so here's another thing that I like to think about. I never like to raise the price any higher than I launched it to the alpha cohort. So as you iterate, you're adding value in terms of production quality and iterative learning, right? So you go through the alpha launch and then you're surveying the people who went through the alpha version. Like, what did you like? What did you dislike? One question I like is, if I had to take 80% of this product out and still charge the same amount for it, what would you recommend that I get rid of? So the next generation product is going to be informed by all that learning, but it's also going to include less of you. I guess if you included a coaching call in the alpha version or if you did a webinar. So I don't like to raise the price. Ideally, I'd like to keep the price the same and compensate for my gradually withdrawing myself from the teaching and making it more and more automated. by the production quality and the potency of the information in the course increasing correspondingly.
Because there's quite a bit of, well, I had this misconception at the start that people want more information, but the more I've studied and put it into practice, the more I realize that, the more you can actually take out and simplify the offering, the more appealing it actually becomes to students, because they don't actually feel as overwhelmed and they don't feel as swamped with the information. So is that sort of what you take clients through as well?
Yeah, and it's what I take clients through makes it sound too much like it's coming from my brain. It's much more of a process of learning from their audience and then making those iterations. So just as an example, Taylor Pearson, who I'm working with to launch his new course called The Effective Entrepreneur, check it out, taylorpearson.me. We did the alpha launch, and a good quarter of the comments from people were telling us too much information, way too much information. This could be 10 products, like I would pay you more for less and just like more curation. So I think you absolutely nailed it with that concept.
So let's now move over and talk a bit about copywriting, which of course is the art of writing words, and funnel design, which is a fancy way of saying like a series of emails that you send out to people based on certain behaviors, with the idea that hopefully with the right copy in the right email funnel will guide people towards a purchase. What's been your experience with copywriting and email funnels?
So copywriting and email funnels were huge for me, and particularly because in the ensuing year after I launched my first successful product, I had to go evergreen with it. So I didn't want to just be tied to doing launches like every month or every 3 months. I wanted to design an experience where every person who joined my list had their own personal experience of getting the launch. So there were a couple of really high leverage things that I picked up over that ensuing year. And let's say there were 3 of them. I'll give you 3 off the top of my head. So number 1 was I studied these marketing gurus like Jeff Walker and Frank Kern to get the rough idea for how an iterative automated email launch might work. You have the 3 explainer emails, and then you have the card open announcement, and then you've got the reminders and so forth. But I found it worked best for me when I took my own copy from the live launch and tried as closely as possible to duplicate that really personal, authentic feeling, as if every person was involved in his or her own launch, while at the same time being honest. So it took a while to dial that in, but I'll just say that I tested sort of carbon copying other people's copy out of these books, and it did not work anywhere near as well as just taking that original spontaneity from my launch and incorporating it in. So now whenever I work with clients, I feel like the most important thing is to be personal and to speak, personally and authentically to their audience. So the second thing is the timing of the emails was huge for me. So I did one split test where I had one cohort going through the sort of traditional Jeff Walker sequence, where there are 3 emails and then a card open announcement and et cetera, et cetera. And my own arrangement, which was 2 emails, a specific number of days apart, and then the card open announcement first, and then the subsequent marketing material while the cart was open. And there was literally a night and day difference between those 2. The one where I tweaked the timing a little bit and opened the card early converted decently, and the one I grafted directly from the books converted hardly at all. And again, I think that's just, it probably varies by the vertical and by the audience, but yeah, it's something to test. So yeah, I put in a slide presentation like the exact timing of those emails, and if people are interested, like I can let you know. But the third thing in terms of email and copywriting over that year was the sales page. So until about August of that year, I had a sales page that was really basic and that I just hadn't really put much work into because I was looking at other things. But I made the decision that I want to finally really write a good sales page. So I locked myself in an office for a week and basically consumed everything that I could find on sales pages. I checked out, we were talking about Ramit Sethi's Zero to Launch sales page that Will from your other interview. I was super interested to discover he had done the same thing, but like I deconstructed that sales page and a couple other people's. And so wrote this long form sales page, threw it up on Optimizely, 2x results in conversions just right away. So those are kind of the big three that worked for me in my business in terms of email marketing and copywriting.
So when it comes to the part where you said, speaking in a personal voice versus, kind of copying and pasting but and then emulating a little bit other people's stuff, I assume you're still including like the core elements of a well-constructed sales page, but you're then doing the language as if you're saying it, or are you taking a different structure as well?
No, it's true. There is a balance there. So the way I conceive of that email series, and this is pretty conventional, but it's kind of a sales letter broken out into 3 parts. And so the first part is resonate with either the customer's biggest pain, their most burning desire, or their biggest obstacle. Kind of what's the thing that sticks out about that audience profile. And if you've spent time listening to your audience, maybe doing surveys like I had, it's really, really great to use their own language. And so email 1 is kind of like reach out into the ethers and say, hey, I understand exactly what you're going through. I've solved the same problem and I have a solution that's the right fit for that problem. And email 2 is a little bit more about, so if email 1 is about benefits, email 2 is a little more about the nitty-gritty of features. So what exactly does the product include? What's your journey through the product going to be like? What does it feel like inside the course? What does it look like? And I use a video that has actual screenshots from the real course. And most importantly, what are you going to be like at the end of that journey? What's the result you're going to achieve? And then
keep going.
Yeah, exactly. So then for me, like email 3 goes directly to the sales page where you kind of have all those traditional elements of the sales page. But I like to continue copywriting through launch week. So if you've got the cart open for 4 days, day 2 is the cart open reminder. So instead of just telling people something they already know, hey, reminder, the cart's still open, which isn't going to get a super high open rate. It's helpful to tease something that maybe they don't know. So, you can go all the way down the spectrum to the really sort of, scandalous, is the course BS? Could it be the course doesn't work, right? That'll get a high open rate. I like to back it off a little and write something like, does the course really work? And maybe that's where you offer proof and testimonials and more about your own story. And what's been interesting, because I want to bring this a little back to what you're saying about reconciling the need to check those boxes that copywriting is supposed to check with also feeling personal and spontaneous. And that's been the biggest eye-opener for me working with clients is now it's like I have to see in 3 dimensions because I have to learn about their audience and I have to write in their audience's language, but I also have to learn about the client and write in their voice. Because if it's in my voice, it's not going to work as well. Just as when I tried to write in Jeff Walker or Frank Kern's voice, it didn't work as well with my audience.
Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense. Nate, that's been very eye-opening and very interesting to talk about these things. As you know, I'm in the middle of a second version of my Web Marketing That Works online course. So I'm going to be applying a lot of what you've just spoken about. Are there any final words of wisdom or anything you'd like to get off your chest before we call it a day?
Oh boy, final words of wisdom. Okay. 2 big things that have succeeded for me, 2 meta points. Number 1, don't launch anything unless your audience is begging you for it. And I know I'm echoing Derek Sivers with this, but that's been true for me. Number 2, once you know that, ship. Like, don't waste time dragging your feet trying to get it perfect. Just get something out because you'll get all sorts of head trash about, I don't know if it's good enough. Like, if you need somebody to hold you accountable, like phone a buddy, tell them, like, call me in 2 weeks if I haven't launched this. I want you to talk down to me severely. But yeah, I think those are the 2 big things I would leave you with.
That's awesome. And that's exactly what I'm doing at the moment. I've got Toby, who's the co-host of this show. We just do the interviews individually, but he is holding me accountable. So every day we've got a daily huddle. I'll report back to him on how I've gone with all the different elements that are laid out in our project plan. And it's good because I know what the deadline is. I've started to launch it. I'm recording the lessons as well based on the validation process we did earlier in the year. But it's nice to have that accountability. And to be honest, I was probably mucking around or wasting a bit of time last month. I kind of knew when I wanted to get it done, but the second I put a deadline in place and then worked back from it and put a call in my calendar every night to report to Toby, all of a sudden things started happening. Whereas if you don't, and it's just like this floating deadline, for me anyway, I procrastinate, but nothing happens. So I think that advice to finish on is superb.
Yeah, deadlines. I hate them, but I love them.
Exactly. Yep. I hate them, but love them too. Without them, I wouldn't do anything, but I do hate them when they, you start to get a bit nervous as the deadline's approaching. You go, oh, have I left myself enough time? But that's when the magic happens, and that's when you get things shipped. So a necessary evil.
Absolutely.
Nate, where can people find out more about you?
Okay. I would like your audience, if they're interested in learning more, to check me out at 8020marketingguide.com/Adam. And if they go there, I'll have a dedicated landing page up with a special offer, which is my 3-step guide to stop losing money in your funnel. And it's about a 10-minute read, but it just goes through this quick outside-in process that I like to use, which is essentially all of the lessons that I learned over a year of trial and error with my funnel distilled into one little infographic.
Awesome. So just say that URL again for us.
That's 8020marketingguy.com/Adam.
So that's guy like a person, not guide with a DE?
Exactly.
Marketing
yeah, GUI.
GUI. 8020marketingguy.com/Adam and download the report. That's what I'll be doing straight away. Nate, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today, and thanks for sharing your insights.
Yeah, it was awesome. Thanks so much for having me on.
Pleasure. And that's a wrap for my chat with Nate Smith. Very interesting guy and lots of useful information on not only validating a product before you make it, but also the sequence of emails and the voice that you use on those emails and that process you go through to educate the prospect as to what journey you're going to take them on and why they should buy. So this is all very relevant stuff for the process that I'm going through at the moment as we launch version 2 of our Web Marketing That Works online course. We've been validating it via a live event and getting feedback on the content, and in the process now of launching it to the people on our email list. And we followed that 3 email warm-up process by sharing lots of different types of educational content, and then basically taking people on the first few steps of that journey and then saying, if you want to continue with us, then there's 30 lessons in the entire course if you're keen to join us. So we're in the middle of the launch now, so we'll report back on how that goes. But Nate Smith has been very, very informative with that interview there. So to recap, that show was brought to you by our book, Web Marketing That Works. And if you haven't got your hands on the bonuses, head over to bluewiremedia.com.au/book. Now, our intent is to deliver actionable advice. I know Nate has done that on this show. If you've got feedback or questions, please shoot them through to me, adam.franklin@bluewiremedia.com.au. And if you've enjoyed the show, I would love it if you took the time to leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. We'll give a shout out to the people that leave a 5-star review. And I look forward to seeing you on the next show. Cheers.